Hello, Samantha from TOTLbill here. Made this podcast today to tell you about things that you should consider when choosing to be in network with an insurance. So this video is for healthcare practitioners, private practice owners, but also could be really helpful for billers and coders and those who work closely with providers, so decision makers, administrators, etc. So what are 6 things you should consider when thinking about whether or not you need to be in network with an insurance company? So I compiled this list because I get asked a lot about whether or not I, as a provider, I should be in network or not in network with an insurance company. And it's a really loaded question because I have to ask you questions to know whether or not I'm answering that correctly. So I compiled this list to help providers make a better, more informed decision about being in network or not in network. So, and I'll precurse this by saying I work with providers who are 50% cash-based, 50% insurance in network. I see providers who are entirely in network and entirely cash-based. And everyone is successful when they're informed. So you can be successful in all of those realms. All of those are options for you as a provider. I would hope by the point of listening to this podcast, you've already made the decision to be in network or out of network, etc. I'm not here to change your mind. I'm here strictly to provide information. So that's kind of a conversation for a different day, and maybe I'll have a podcast on that as well. But for this conversation, you should already have made the decision on whether or not you want to be in network or out of network with insurances. This is just deciding whether or not you pick the right ones. So 6 things to consider when choosing to be in network with an insurance company. Number 1, fees. This is always the most common one. It doesn't necessarily mean it's the most important. The others shouldn't be forgotten, but fees, because we want you to get paid. So fees in general, what is the insurance company saying they're going to pay you? A lot of times you can't find this out until you have a contract with the insurance company sent to you to show you what the fees are. The best way to find that out with having to go through all that trouble is to talk to your colleagues and find out from a colleague what exactly you're making on certain insurances. So fees, you want to know in general what you're going to get paid based on the contract. You want to know what you're going to get paid in comparison to what your cash rate is for your patients that you're out of network with, or if you're not taking insurances, simply what your cash rate is. And then you want to know what the fee is in comparison to other plans in your area. So in our area in Clinton County, we have 3 Blue Cross Blue Shield plans. We're in crossover territory, and all of them have a different fee schedule. Many providers who opt to be in one opt to be in all of them. Not saying that's the best approach, but it's important to know what all the fees are of all the insurances in the area so you can make an informed decision on what plans to stay in network with and what plans to stay out of network with. Number 2, what is the patient responsibility like across the plans? So let's talk about in our area in Clinton County, we're in crossover territory. We have 3 Blue Cross Blue Shield plans local to our area. We have Empire Blue Cross Blue Shield, which is the Blue Cross of New York. We have Excelis Blue Cross Blue Shield, which is common to Upstate. And then we have Blue Shield Northeastern New York, which is common to Western New York and Eastern New York. So those 3 plans, though very different, have a standard when it comes to patient responsibility. So one of the observations you'll make in Clinton County is that though Empire Blue Cross happens to be more common among patients, they also happen to offer more plans that have a higher deductible or a higher patient responsibility. So that means when the patient comes to you, they're going to owe you more upfront and you're going to get less from the insurance company later. Now, Blue Shield Northeastern New York, they happen to have a standard reimbursement significantly lower than Empire Blue Cross in the physical therapy realm, significantly higher in the mental health realm. So though vastly different overall, despite the difference in specialty, patient responsibility remains similar in that regard. So patients that have Blue Shield Northeastern New York tend to have a lower patient responsibility than patients that tend to have Empire Blue Cross Blue Shield. A lower patient responsibility means that you collect less upfront and you get more from the insurance company. So it's really important to know when you make the decision to choose whether or not you want to be in network with a plan. If you're someone that is okay collecting upfront, which if you're a cash provider, I really hope you are. So if you're someone that's okay with collecting upfront, doesn't make you uncomfortable, I'll actually talk about that in I have a blog on that too as well on my website, but I'll talk about that in another podcast. If you're someone that doesn't mind collecting up front, then it's not going to bother you to work with a higher fee schedule that has a higher patient responsibility, because you'll just collect that money up front as you know you need to. But if you're someone that really struggles with that, you might be more likely to take a plan, or at least you should, like Blue Shield Northeastern New York, that has a standard of lower patient responsibility. But now we also have to factor in all the other things, right? So we just talked about number one, the fees. So if the fees are really a lot lower, then it doesn't matter because you're still losing money, right? But it's something you want to consider, because if you're not good at collecting up front, then you're not getting any money anyway, right? So we have to balance all these things out. So if you don't like to collect up front, you want to consider a plan or a insurance company that has more plans with a lower patient responsibility, and then vice versa. So number three, you want to consider the time it takes to get the reimbursement as well. So workers' comp plans really vary. If you want to consider seeing a patient that has workers' comp, you might also want to consider knowing what plan they have. So with the New York State Insurance Fund, they have an electronic portal. You can get paid in 2 weeks or less. With a smaller company that might be national but still smaller, it might take you 8 weeks to 3 months to get paid. Even though they say they have 45 days, it might take you that long, and by the time you report it, you already have your payment, so what was the point? But other insurances to consider, for example, Medicare might be 3 weeks to get paid. Blue Cross Blue Shield plans locally, at least in our region, and nationally, if you're billing your local with that plan, 1 to 2 weeks. But your smaller plans or your national plans, your Cigna, your Aetna, that aren't local to your area, they could be 1 week to 8 weeks. It's quite the range. So thinking about the time it takes to get the reimbursement is really important and should factor in your decision on whether or not you want to be in network with an insurance company. A little sidebar, to be a successful business, it's really helpful to have a good variety of income, meaning you see all of those and you're in network with multiple payers, or at least you're treating patients with multiple insurances, different insurances across your income base, because you want to make sure that the income is always coming in, even if one stream stops. All right, number 4, customer service. This is really important and doesn't get nearly as much credit as it should when factoring into the decision of being in network with an insurance company. But knowing what an insurance company's customer service is like is incredibly important to the success of your practice in taking that insurance. So kind of like you wouldn't go buy a car at a dealership because it was a great deal if the customer service was terrible, right? So it's kind of the same thing. We're not going to go in network with an insurance company if the customer service is horrible, because you will have a problem. There will be a claim that denies. You may know, you may not. You may understand why, or you may not have any idea. But regardless, now you have to call and figure out what's wrong with it. Or if you have a billing agent, your billing agent has to call and figure out what's wrong with it. And you're probably thinking, well, if I have a billing agent, then why do I care about customer service? Well, if your billing agent has to spend time calling to get your claims reprocessed, now your billing agent is spending less time working on your account and doing other valuable things that will help make you money. So that's number 1. Number 2, now it's taking you longer to get your money, right? Because if you had a good customer service team working with that insurance company, they'd get the error fixed right away and you'd have your money back. So a lot of people ask me, what do you mean good customer service? So I mean a lot of things when I say that. It's kind of loaded. It's helpful to know you've got a local rep to work with. So if there's an issue with your payments going to the right address or being set up for EFT, getting remits electronically, all those things, a local rep with a phone and email is really helpful. And if you're taking a certain payer, you can typically make sure that happens. Some national payers, you really don't have control over that. But for the most part, with local payers, even payers somewhere in the state, when I say local, I mean in the state, you should be able to make that happen. Other things to ask yourself when you're thinking about good customer service is, how long does it take to get a live person? Is the customer service overseas or abroad? Can the person who answers the phone get you a supervisor? Can they get you the tier 2 team? Is there a language barrier between your communication with the customer service team or the tier 2 team, or the person who answers the phone to get you to those places? Do they sound knowledgeable? I know you'll understand when I say that you can sometimes tell right away if the person is knowledgeable by the first few questions they ask you. A lot of times with insurance companies, it's scripted to a certain point anyway, and you'll gauge that with different insurance companies, but you can kind of tell after the first few questions of loose conversation if they're knowledgeable or not. So those are things that you might not be able to tell before you get in network with an insurance company just by calling them. You might have to ask your colleagues and ask your colleagues' colleagues to give you some feedback on that. Any other providers that you know in the area, ask them what their thoughts are on the customer service, because more than likely it doesn't take more than a few months in network with an insurance company to know that you need to call customer service for something with a claim. So most everyone should be able to give you some good feedback on that. Number 5, you want to consider how much of your patient base is included or excluded with your decision to be in network, and figure out if you care or not, because how many patients are affected should factor in your decision for the most part to be in network. And I have a lot of providers that come up to me and say things like, I have 3 patients that really want to be seen by me, and they're all hesitant because I'm not in network and they're going to be paying what they consider is too much money to come and see me. I want to become in network. So oftentimes, depending on the insurance, I'll say things like, well, the reason you're not in network now is so-and-so. Let's say it's because the reimbursement is $65 and you charge $120. That's why you're not in network. So are you willing to take $60 now when you weren't willing to do that before? And they'll say no. And I'll say, okay, well, that's a simple answer, right? So just because a few patients want it, you have to think about your practice as a whole and the security of your business when you're making that decision on who it includes and who it excludes, and if that matters. And lastly, what does the insurance pay out of network? So this is really important to consider, because a lot of times in network might be, let's use that example again, 60, out of network is 120. And if you see the patient out of network, oftentimes once they meet their out of network deductible, it's covered in full, or they have a co-insurance, but then they're still seeing you. You're still getting paid what you want to get paid. Everybody wins. So that's why it's important to consider what you get paid out of network, and if it's worth billing the insurance for the patient, which you're doing a courtesy to them. They'll be thrilled about that. They don't have to submit it for reimbursement, and you're getting the reimbursement you want. So consider what they pay out of network before you go jump the gun and choose to be in network. Okay, so if you listen this long, you know the 6 big things to consider when choosing to be in network with an insurance company if you're a healthcare provider. So I'm going to recap over them real quick. So number 1, the fees, which is in general, what is the contract offering to pay you? And then what does that mean in comparison to your self-pay rate and to other plans in your area? Number 2, what is the patient responsibility like across all insurance companies and their plans? Use that as a tool to decide whether or not you want to be in network, and base it off of if you're good collecting up front or if you're not. Number 3, what's the time it takes to get reimbursement from the insurance company? Remember, workers' comp could be 1 week, could be 3 months. Medicare could be 3 weeks. Blue Cross could be 2 weeks. Your national plans could be 1 week, could be 8 weeks. So think about that before you make the decision. And no, just because the paperwork says you'll get paid in 30 days or less, don't believe that. Ask providers in your area what their feedback has been, because more times than not, that's worth more than whatever the contract says, unfortunately. Number 4, what's the customer service like with that insurance company? Is there a local rep? How long does it take to get a person live on the phone? Are they overseas? Can you get a supervisor? Is there a language barrier? Is that person knowledgeable? Can they answer your questions? Number 5, how much of your patient base is included or excluded in your decision, and do you care? Does that affect you? Does that affect them, and how? And number 6, what does the insurance pay you out of network? What if you decided to bill that insurance company out of network? What would that look like? So those are the 6 most important things to consider when choosing to be in network with an insurance company. I hope that you found this informative, and if nothing else, whether you choose to be in network with an insurance company, bill out of network, be a cash-based provider, I would like you to just leave this episode knowing that you are more informed with whatever decision you choose to make. All right, Samantha from TOTLbill signing off. Thanks so much for listening.